Oh, hi, everybody. It's Tim, just happy as a clam to be with you today. I hope your day is going well. As we think about the Bible a little bit today, our reading for today was in Judges, chapters 15, 16, and 17 today. And the story was of the Philistines who ruled over Israel for 40 years. And finally, it was God's will to defeat the Philistines and give his people freedom. And as usual, his method was to raise up a special man who would do his will. God found a couple who could not have children, and God gave them a special child, Samson. And even before birth, the plan for his entire life was that he was meant to be a Nazarite, as we read about in Numbers chapter 6. And that meant that no alcohol, no haircuts. But the only place the Bible mentions Samson outside of these chapters is in Hebrews chapter 11, where he is listed as a man of great faith. And I'll be honest with you, uh, if it were not for Hebrews 11, I think that would change the way I read this story about Samson. For the life of me, I don't see great faith in the story of his life, do you? Now, the pictures I've seen of Samson in Sunday school or other places usually show him, as a bodybuilder who obviously spends hours a day in the gym with his bulging muscles. But in the Bible, he seems to look like an ordinary man who just happens to have the strength to tear lions apart. And the Spirit of the Lord gave him that strength. There was not time in the gym, but in appearance, it seems like his strength was a mystery to those who saw him. But in his life, we don't see him leading people to worship Jehovah. We don't see him fighting the battles of the Lord. All we see is just a sad story of an immoral man with anger management issues, trying to get even with people who wronged him in some way. It started with his wedding to a Philistine girl who betrayed him, and he got even by killing Philistines for their garments. And from then on, the story of his life was just one story after another of a foolish man trying to repay Philistines for personal grudges, and ends up with another attractive woman, Delilah, who betrays him again to the Philistines by breaking his Nazarite vow this time. Now, I don't see a lot of faith in this man's life. The only place I see evidence of faith in this man was in his death. He was captured after Delilah's betrayal. He was bound. He was blinded. He was made a slave, grinding out the grain for the Philistines. In his life, spiritually, he had been a slave to sin. Spiritually, he had been blind to God's truth, and now he spent every day acting out what his spiritual life had been physically. And then we read in verse 22 that the hair of his head began to grow again. Isn't that a strange verse? I mean, that seems so obvious. His hair grew. You may wonder why that verse even ended up in the Bible. But I think it's meant to show evidence that now he was keeping his Nazarite vow and he was meaning it. In his life, he was used by God. But in his captivity, he came to know God. He heard the Philistines praising their god Dagon in verses 23 and 24, and it says, the lords of the Philistines gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon their god, and to rejoice, for they said, our God hath delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hand. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God hath delivered into our hands our enemy. You see, they saw the spiritual significance of what was going on, even if Samson didn't before. And then at the very end of his life, we see Samson doing something he had not done before. He's praying. The only other time in the story of his life we see him praying is when he told God he was thirsty, but this prayer was obviously different than that one. Verse 28, it says, Samson called unto the Lord, Jehovah, and said, O Lord Adonai, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me. I pray thee only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars upon which the house stood, and upon it was borne up, of the one with his right hand, and of the other with his left. And Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords, and upon all the people that were therein. And so the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life. So here we see Samson finally. He prays for God to remember him. It was obvious that the Spirit of the Lord had departed from him. He had plenty of time to think about that. And now he asked for mercy. Lord, would you remember me like you did before? He prayed for God to strengthen him. He'd never done that before. In all the feats of strength you read about, he never prayed about it. He never asked God, give me the strength to defeat the enemy in some way. And finally he prayed for his death to mean something. To let me die with the Philistines. And God answered that prayer. The lesson for this is that no matter how far you walked away from God, it's never too late to turn to him. He's always the God of a second chance. And I think that's what we see here in the faith at the end of Samson's life that can apply to all of us today. Yes, his life is a cautionary tale. It's a warning that sin is real. It can ruin your life. But I think at the end of the day, we see also God as a God of mercy. He was for Samson. He'll be for you, my friend, if you simply turn your life over to him today. Well, give that some thought, my friends, today. And we'll be back in the Bible tomorrow in Judges 18 and 19. Be reading that, consider it, and I'll look forward to being back with you then. Have a great day, my friends.